Good morning, everyone. Uh, I'll be presenting the Philippines in the Asia Pacific context. The assigned topic for me is just the overview of the Philippine Asia context, and the latter presenters, which are my group mates, will be presenting specific topics that revolves around Philippines in the Asia Pacific. Now, for the scope of my presentation, I'll just be discussing the brief overview, the Philippines as an archipelagic Southeast Asian country. With this, I'll discuss also the importance of its location in geopolitics, culture, trade, and migration, as well as the overview of the Austronesian origins and regional connectedness. In the second part, I'll be discussing the geography and culture of the pre-modern Philippines. I'm going to discuss the archipelagic nature, the location in the Asia Pacific region, the environmental diversity and its influence on settlement and livelihood, as well as the natural resources and the historical implications. On the last part, I'll be discussing also the cultural roots, the Austronesian heritage, the Austronesian migration theory, expansion from Taiwan, as well as the early seafaring society and barangay system, the linguistic ties to the Pacific and Southeast Asia, and the oral traditions, kinship systems, belief systems such as Anito worship, Babaylan, and etc. Okay, so let's start with the simple question. Where exactly is the Philippines? If you look at this map, the Philippines sits like a bridge between two worlds, the vast Pacific Ocean to the east and the South China Sea to the west. It's not just one island, but an incredible 7,641 islands scattered across over 1,100 miles of ocean. Think about this for a moment. Imagine trying to govern or even communicate across thousands of islands before modern technology. Yet this seemingly challenging geography became the Philippines' greatest strength. These islands serve as stepping stones for traders, explorers, and cultures moving between Asia and the Pacific. The Philippines is roughly the same size as Italy, but spread across water instead of connected land. This unique position made it a natural meeting place, or a crossroads where East Asian merchants met Southeast Asian traders, where different languages mixed and where diverse cultures blended together. From the very beginning, the Philippines was never isolated. It was connected to the world through the sea. Now, let's dive deeper into this archipelago. When we say 7,641 islands, what does that really mean? Okay, so picture this: if you visited one island every single day, it would take you over 20 years to see them all. But here's the fascinating part: only about 2,800 of these islands even have names. So the Philippines is organized into four major regions, each with its own character. In the north, we have Luzon, the largest island and home to Manila. This is where some of the most important settlements like the Tondo and Maynila flourished. Moving south, we find the Visayas, a cluster of islands including Cebu, Negros, and Bohol. Then there's Mindanao in the south, the second largest island. Finally, stretching west like a finger pointing towards Southeast Asia, we have Palawan with its own mini archipelago of 1,700 smaller islands. But here's what makes this geography truly remarkable. These islands weren't barriers. Instead, they were highways. Ancient Filipinos didn't see water as something that separated them. They saw it as something that connected them. Every island was a port. Every strait was a trade route, and every bay was a meeting place for different peoples and cultures. The Philippines isn't just diverse in terms of island. It's incredibly diverse in environment too. Imagine living in a place where you only have two seasons, wet and dry. No spring, no autumn, just rain and sunshine. This might sound simple, but it created complex patterns of life. Here's something that might surprise you. The Philippines gets hit by about 20 typhoons every year. That's almost 2 per month during typhoon season. These powerful storms mostly strike the eastern and northern regions, which explains why more people historically settled on the western side of the islands. Well, it's a perfect example of how environment shapes human choices. But the Philippines sits on what we call the Ring of Fire, a chain of volcanoes that stretches from Alaska to Indonesia, and the country has 37 volcanoes. Now, you might think this is a purely dangerous, but here's the twist. Volcanic soil is incredibly fertile. The same forces that can destroy also create the rich earth that feeds millions. I have a question. How do you build a civilization when nature is both your greatest ally and your biggest challenge? The early Filipinos learned to read the weather, respect the volcanoes, and work with the rhythms of their environment. They didn't fight nature, they danced with it. Another question. What made the Philippines so attractive to traders and settlers throughout history? And the answer lies in its incredible natural wealth. But this isn't just about gold and precious stones, though the Philippines had plenty of those too. Let's start with the obvious. Those volcanic eruptions we mentioned, they left behind some of the most fertile soil on Earth. This rich Earth could grow almost anything: rice, fruits, spices. For ancient traders, this meant the Philippines could feed their crews and provide valuable agricultural products. Then there's the sea itself. With thousands of islands comes thousands of miles of coastline, and with that comes an ocean full of fish, pearls, and other marine treasures. The early Filipinos became master fishermen and pearl divers, skills that made them valuable trading partners. But here's what truly remarkable. The Philippines is home to creatures found nowhere else on Earth. 70% of its reptiles and 44% of its birds exist only here. This incredible biodiversity wasn't just beautiful, instead also it was valuable. Exotic animals, rare plants, and unique materials became trade goods that connected the Philippines to markets across Asia. Gold was also abundant, and early Filipinos were skilled at working with it. They created intricate jewelry and ornaments that impressed foreign visitors. But perhaps most importantly, they understood that their greatest resource wasn't what they could take from the land. It was how they could use the land and sea to connect with the wider world. Now, let's travel back in time, way back about 6,000 years ago. Something extraordinary began. Picture this: there's a groups of people living in southern China and Taiwan look out at a vast ocean and decided to explore what lay beyond the horizon. This wasn't just curiosity. Instead, this was one of the humanity's greatest adventures. These people, called Austronesians, became the world's greatest ocean explorers. 6,000 years ago, there were no GPS system, no weather satellites, no modern navigation tools. Yet these brave seafarers managed to spread across the Pacific Ocean, reaching islands thousands of miles apart. Around 4,000 years ago, they reached the Philippines, but they didn't stop there. Over the next 2,000 years, their descendants continued this incredible journey, eventually reaching as far as the Madagascar off the coast of Africa and the remote islands of Polynesia. That's like traveling from New York to London, but in small boats across dangerous seas. And an archaeologist named Solheim called these ancient seafarers Nusandao, or the people of the islands. They developed amazing boats called barangay with bamboo outriggers that could sail smoothly and quickly across the waves. These weren't just boats, instead they were the vehicles of one of the most successful migration. When we look at modern Filipinos, we're looking at the descendants of these incredible ocean explorers. The spirit of adventure, the connection to the sea, the ability to adapt and thrive in new places, and these traits have been part of Filipino culture for thousands of years. So these ancient seafarers arrived in the Philippines and established something remarkable: a society built around the sea. And they're called their communities barangays, named after the very boats that brought them there. The word for their home came from the word of their journey. But what was life like in these early barangays? Picture a community of about 30 to 100 families led by a chief called a datu. These weren't primitive settlements, instead they were sophisticated societies with complex rules, trade networks, and social structures. We know about these ancient communities because they left us a message. In 1989, archaeologists discovered a copper plate buried in a riverbank. This plate, called the Laguna Copper Plate inscription, was written in about 900 CE, or that's over 1,100 years ago. It's like finding an ancient text message that tells us about death, slavery, and social relationships in early Filipino society. The inscription tells the story of a family being freed from debt slavery. Shows us that these early Filipinos had complex economic systems, legal procedures, and social hierarchies. They weren't just surviving, instead they were thriving, creating laws, conducting business, and building communities that lasted for centuries. But perhaps, most importantly, these barangays were connected. The same boats that brought people to the islands continued to carry goods, ideas, and cultures between different communities. Each barangay was like a node in a vast network that stretches across the archipelago and beyond. If you speak Tagalog, try saying these words: budhi, muka, guro, tala. Now, what if I told you that these everyday Filipino words actually come from Sanskrit, or an ancient language from India? And this reminds us that there is a power in cultural connection. The copper plate that we mentioned earlier, it wasn't written in just one language. Scholars found words from Sanskrit, Old Javanese, Old Malay, and Old Tagalog all mixed together. And so imagine finding a document today that seamlessly blended English, Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic. And that's how cosmopolitan these early Filipinos communities were. This tells us something profound: that the Philippines was never isolated. Long before the internet, before airplanes, before modern communications, the islands were connected to a vast network of cultures stretching from India to the Pacific. Filipino languages belong to the Austronesian family, or one of the most world's largest language families that includes languages spoken from Madagascar to Easter Island. This wasn't just about borrowing words. When you adopt something else word for teacher, for example, or guro, or conscience, or buddhi, you're also adopting their ideas about education and morality. Language carries culture, and culture shapes how we see the world. Every time a modern Filipino uses these ancient borrowed words, they're participating in a conversation that began over 1,000 years ago. They're speaking not just as Filipinos, but as members of a vast Pacific and Asian cultural community that has been sharing ideas for millennia. Now, let's explore the spiritual world of early Filipinos. Imagine living in a world where every tree, every river, every mountain has a spirit, where your ancestors watch over you, and where the boundary between the physical and spiritual world is as thin as morning mists. This was the reality for pre-colonial Filipinos. They practiced what we call Anito worship, or the veneration of nature spirits and deified ancestors. But this wasn't a primitive superstition. It was a sophisticated way of understanding the world that emphasized respect for nature, reverence for elders, and as well as the responsibility to community. At the heart of these belief systems were the Babaylans. And here's something remarkable: most of them were women. In a world where many cultures restricted women roles, Filipino society recognized women as powerful spiritual leaders. Babaylans were healers, counselors, ritual leaders, and keepers of wisdom. They could also communicate with spirits, predict the future, and guide their communities through difficult times. These spiritual leaders also preserved the oral traditions, such as the epic poems, creation stories, and historical accounts that were passed down through generations. Before there were books, there were babaylans keeping the culture alive through memory and storytelling. But perhaps most importantly, the belief system emphasized kinship and community. Extended families weren't just social units, they are also spiritual networks. Your obligations didn't end with death. Ancestors continued to play active roles in family decisions and community life. Even today, despite centuries of foreign influence, you can still see the echoes of these ancient Filipinos' beliefs in Filipino culture, in the respect for elders, the importance of family, and the deep connection to the natural world. As we reach the end of our journey through pre-colonial Philippine history, let's pause and reflect on what we've discovered. We began with a simple question about geography, but we've uncovered something much more profound, which is the story of human resilience, adaptability, and connection. The Philippines' location as a geographic crossroads wasn't just an accident of geology. It was the foundation of a unique civilization. These islands created a people who were naturally cosmopolitan, naturally connected to the wider world, and naturally adaptable to change. The Austronesian expansion that brought the first settlers wasn't just a migration, it was one of humanity's greatest adventure, creating a cultural foundation that still influences Filipino identity today. The barangay system wasn't just a form of government, it was a way of organizing society that balanced individual needs with community welfare. Understanding this rich colonial history helped us see Filipino culture not as something that was shaped only by foreign influence, but as something with deep indigenous roots. The resilience we see in modern Filipino communities, the adaptability that allows Filipino to thrive around the world, the stronger family bonds that define Filipino society, these aren't recent developments. They're the continuation of traditions that are thousands of years old. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening.